All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rewire Guide to the Pelvic Floor. You're not seeing double here. This is a correction. I'm going live again to do a correction of the previous version of this video that I did. Annoyingly, performed a lot better in terms of views than a lot of these live videos do, but was going through with a client around pelvic floor exercises, and they kind of mentioned that they were doing one of the things and it wasn't really helping them very much, and discovered that I gave the wrong information. So I'm going to redo the entire video. With the correct information, and I'm going to do the video backwards. The information I gave that was incorrect was way at the end, and I'll just reverse it around. So if you did watch the other video, you'll have to sit through the intro again, but we'll get the up-to-date information on the breathing with the Kegel exercises pretty quickly, and the rest is going to be pretty much the same, maybe a little bit more detail. So yeah, let's get into it. If you find that any of this is interesting or helpful, there's links in the description where you can book a session to come and work with me. We can kind of look at things in a little bit more depth, but this should help get you started if you want to take a crack at things on your own. So pelvic floor is basically just referring to the group of muscles that kind of help hold in all of the kind of organs to do with the excretory system. So things like your bladder and stuff like that. And it seems like it's pretty common, especially as we get older, to see a lot of dysfunction going on with the pelvic floor. Some of what I'm going to talk about today might kind of explain why that is, but in terms of why people usually are looking to work on their pelvic floor, most of the time it's going to be to do with kind of, what's the nicest way to say this, leaking, bladder issues, incontinence issues, just anything where can't hold in the urine or excrement, and they want to help kind of keep the sphincter muscles closed and be able to stay closed throughout the day without needing to worry. There's also kind of risk of prolapse in these areas. So if the pelvic floor muscles become weak, everything kind of sags down, which isn't that much fun. And then for females as well, after childbirth, it can also be kind of difficult to strengthen these muscles back up again. And then finally, some people also use pelvic floor strengthening as a way to get even more kind of core stability and core strength. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well, because things can work the other way around. If you're looking for like a training modality or an approach that can be useful for kind of pelvic floor training, probably Pilates is like your best one to go to. Anything that deals with analyzing sort of core musculature and stability in that much detail is going to be pretty good for waking up and activating the pelvic floor muscles as well, and they'll even do occasionally some specific work on that. So that's kind of the best place to look if you just want to find a way of training that just keeps your pelvic floor generally healthy. But what I want to do today is, if you do find that you want to work on strengthening your pelvic floor, I want to give you maybe about 5 or so different things that you might think about in terms of what you can do. And I'm not going to go super deep into the muscle strengthening exercises, because you can find plenty of those just with a quick YouTube search. But first, let's talk about the strengthening aspect. So that is what we would refer to as Kegels, the kind of most common pelvic floor training exercise is basically seeing if you can contract a bunch of those muscles that are around that area. And the traditional way that people will do this is by trying to contract the sphincter muscles. So people describe Kegel exercises as like trying to release and then shut off the flow of urine. So imagine, you're in the bathroom, you're going to let some out, you're going to then try to squeeze and then hold it, and then you're going to let some out, you're going to try and squeeze and hold it. Sorry, this is going to be a video of graphic stuff today. Sorry about that, nothing I can do really. But this holding aspect, the actual consciously squeezing and contracting the sphincter muscles, that is essentially what we're looking at when it comes to strengthening the pelvic floor. And as I said, I'm not going to add too much into that, except to say that there's sort of two aspects of pelvic floor training that people maybe take a little bit for granted. One is the fact that pelvic floor strengthening actually requires you to take a lot of rest in between. So when you're doing one of these exercises where you're contracting and squeezing pretty hard, you want to do that, as much as you can for a short period of time. And then you want to have a pretty big gap before you launch into the next one. And the second thing that is going to be useful to know is that you can influence these contractions with your breathing. So when you breathe, your diaphragm is moving up and down in your torso, and you actually have another kind of like diaphragm-like thing helping to control the pelvic floor as well. And ideally, these diaphragms should work in unison with each other. So when one diaphragm goes up, the other should go down, and vice versa. So we want to always be kind of pressing each one in the same direction. So the way we can think about this is when we are doing an exhale, so when we're breathing all of our air out, the diaphragm for our lungs is going to lift up. Okay, so when the diaphragm lifts up, the lungs are going to get smaller. The diaphragm is moving up, so it's kind of like clearing out any space in the lungs, and that's how we exhale all of the air. And when this diaphragm lifts up, then we want the diaphragm at the bottom to also lift up at the same time. It will be lifting up at the same time. And during that period, that is actually the beneficial point to be squeezing, to be clenching the sphincter muscles in order to get maximum strength out of the pelvic floor. So the way that I would normally recommend to people, if you're going to perform like a Kegel exercise where it's like squeeze, everything down there nice and tight, try to stop the flow of urine, stop the flow of feces. You're going to do it during the time period of a really long exhale. So you'll be totally relaxed. You'll take a nice deep breath in, and then you're going to exhale out for as long as you possibly can. So it's not like a forceful exhale. It's like a super slow and relaxed exhale. And during that exhale is when you want to do the clenching, when you want to do the kind of squeezing, and then you want to be leaving at least kind of 2 minutes or so in between. And about 5 rounds of that, you'll get a much more powerful kind of pelvic floor training exercise, much more powerful Kegel exercise than if you did it without the breathing and if you did it without the rest. So in terms of Kegels, that's as far as I'm going to go with it. As I said, just type in pelvic floor strengthening and Kegel exercises into YouTube. You'll find loads of different tutorials, loads of different ways that you can do this. I actually think when it comes to the pelvic floor, that's not the most interesting part, because your brain really doesn't intend for you to be consciously trying to control these muscles. And so while the muscles may be weak, conscious control over them can do part of the job, but a lot of this is going to be driven by trying to figure out, well, why would the brain be making these areas weaker to begin with? So what I'd like to do now is kind of move a bit further up the chain from the Kegel exercises to explore like what else might actually be beneficial in getting the pelvic floor to be able to contract. And it's probably not going to be surprising, given that I mentioned that Pilates is going to be a really good way to be strengthening the pelvic floor. But the very next thing that we can do is to go one step up the chain, and that's going to be looking at exercises that strengthen the glutes, the lower back, and the core. Basically, the idea here is if you find Kegel exercises really difficult, if you say that, like, I'm trying to sort of squeeze, but it doesn't feel like I've got control down there, or I just don't seem to be able to do it very well, then if we get the muscles nearby recruited, there's a very good chance that that is going to cause some kind of change to the pelvic floor muscles at the same time. So anytime you contract one muscle, the contraction is going to cause stretch in muscles that are nearby, and this is going to cause them to kind of like snap out of it and wake up if they haven't previously been responding very much to anything. If your glutes and core are super relaxed all the time, to like as much as they're able to be, then you probably find that even as hard as you try to perform these Kegel exercises, there's not going to be a whole lot that they're able to do, because the kind of chain down from the brain is just not so strongly wired. I guess that's what I want to say. So with that in mind, when it comes to practicing these Kegel exercises, as well as syncing it up with your breathing, another thing that you may want to look into is actually performing some kind of a glute bridge. So that's lying on your back, feet flat on the floor, and then you're going to rock your pelvis up. You're going to kind of like lift. So most of your back is off the floor. So if you just imagine feet flat on the floor, knees bent, and then your whole back up to your shoulders is off the floor, and then you just like shoulders and head lying down on the floor. Adding that in can be a really good way to get those muscles recruited. That's going to strengthen the glutes. That is going to strengthen the core. If we then perform the long exhale at the same time as trying to squeeze just everything, like just don't even worry about whether it's a Kegel exercise or not, just squeeze, 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 and you're hopefully going to get some activation there. That can work wonders if you're struggling to get the pelvic floor to wake up. And the only thing to bear in mind is at some point then you want the pelvic floor to be able to function kind of independently of the glutes and core. So eventually we want to then be able to still do the exercise without doing the glute bridges as well. So then we'll move even further up the chain, and this is where it's going to get a little bit weirder. But now we're going to talk about your jaw and your neck. So a lot of the time when I'm talking to clients about like issues with pain or issues with function of the muscles, one of the easiest ways to get like a very quick win is not to address the problem itself, but to actually go to the opposite end of the body and find like the reciprocal joint or the reciprocal body part to that area. So when it comes to the pelvic floor, if we think of like the area right on the very bottom of the spine, then if we want to change and influence that, we actually just want to jump right up to the very top of the spine and figure out, well, what muscles and what joints are up at the top that could be opposing. So when we look at the top, obviously the jaw is kind of the top contender. When it comes to the jaw, there's a few reasons why mobility exercises and jaw muscle control exercises might actually influence the pelvic floor. One of them is to do with digestion. So your jaw is the first step of the digestive system. Your pelvic floor is basically housing all the organs at the complete other end of the digestive system. And as far as your brain is concerned, if one of those areas isn't doing its job, if one of those areas isn't working properly, then there's almost not even much sense in the other area also working properly, because one area not working is going to lead to like a chain reaction of everything else not working well as well. So when it comes to the jaw, the kind of classic thing is, if you're not chewing your food, this is going to mess up your digestive processes. And when digestion isn't going well, then, the excretion side of things also is not going to be going particularly well. And therefore, one of the things that you can actually do to improve pelvic floor function is actually chew your food more. So part of the reason why a lot of ultra processed foods and things like that seem to contribute to things like IBS is that they're really hard to chew for a long time. The way our bodies are designed is when food goes into our mouth, we're supposed to chew it till it becomes like just complete liquid, and then it gets swallowed, and then it's already broken down enough so the stomach doesn't have to work too hard with everything it needs to do, so that they can then be kind of passed on. When you're eating highly processed foods, actually a lot of the flavor, because it's being sort of added onto the top, a lot of the flavor only lasts for a couple of bites. And if you continue to chew that food, you start to unlock like all of the chemical tastes involved with that as well. And that means it's kind of a little bit gross and unpleasant to keep chewing it for a long time. So what it teaches you to do is you want to swallow it earlier. What this is going to do then is, number one, it's going to mess up a little bit, not completely, but it'll mess with the digestive system a little bit, which isn't very ideal. But then also the brain has already built in loads of kind of reflexive mechanisms saying, all right, well, if you are actually digesting food, if we're taking digestion seriously, then I should expect that the jaw is going to do a certain amount of work. I should expect to get that feedback from the muscles controlling the jaw. I should expect to get the feedback from the teeth when they're kind of vibrating against each other. And if I'm not getting that information, then that's going to affect all of the signals that I send right the way down the rest of my digestive system. So for my stomach, for my intestines, for my bladder, for my rectum, all of those things are going to get different information, and the information is probably going to be less biased towards the rest and digest state, because it's saying, all right, well, if you're just swallowing your food down, you're probably in a rush. You're probably in a rush because, stress levels need to be high. So we actually don't want to be all nice and tight and controlled. We just want to be in a state of get everything through you as quickly as possible. So again, sorry for the graphic detail in today's video. Sucks twice as much that I have to refilm this. So working on the jaw, chewing your food more, but also just any kind of jaw mobility exercise. Can you get your jaw to glide nice and smoothly side to side? Is going to send more signals to the brain that we're closer to like a rest and digest, more chilled out state. And that's going to get more signals sent down to the rest of the digestive system, which ultimately means more control over your pelvic floor, because the brain has a more vested interest in controlling these organs. The second side of kind of jaw mobilization and jaw mobility exercises, and why I kind of mentioned the neck as well, is anything at the top of the spine influences everything at the bottom of the spine when it comes to posture and balance. So, you've probably been told, for if you work at a desk job, one of the things you've got to watch out for is that like forward head posture. And if you've looked into posture, one of the other things that you might also be aware of is that forward head posture doesn't just kind of sit on its own. It also tends to have a knock-on effect to the pelvis, and that causes the pelvis to kind of tilt, almost like pulling backwards. So when the head goes forwards, that causes us to be slightly imbalanced. If my head just pushes forwards like this, I get heavier at the front. That's going to mean more weight on the front of my feet. So the brain counteracts that by saying, okay, if we've got more weight coming forwards this way, then we're going to tilt the pelvis backwards the other way. And this pelvic tilt is going to then have a knock-on effect to the internal organs, specifically the bladder and the rectum, and this could contribute to some of the kind of leakage problems that we mentioned at the start. So anytime that we've got a tight neck or a neck or jaw that is kind of like biased to be in one specific position, we will probably find that there'll be some kind of a knock-on effect lower down in the other half of the spine, and addressing the top can also lead to changes in the bottom. What does this look like? Pretty much any kind of neck mobility exercises, as well as these jaw kind of glides. So gliding your jaw side to side, forwards and back as smoothly as you can in a variety of different head positions can also be pretty useful when it comes to improving the postural control over the pelvic region. And then that can have a knock-on effect again to the pelvic floor, having more kind of access and control. So we'll move again further on up, almost there. The next thing that we're going to look at is around bilateral symmetrical movement. So when we're talking about Kegel exercises, those like sphincters kind of contracting, and even like any of the other muscles surrounding the pelvic floor area, pretty much all the time, these are muscles where both sides should always be moving symmetrically. Okay, so you've got most of the muscles in your body aren't set up to move symmetrically. A lot of them, all the kind of external muscles that we're familiar with, almost expect that they're going to work in opposition. So, when my right bicep flexes because I'm swinging my arm forward, the left bicep is going to extend as that arm swings backward. We spend more time walking than we do anything else. And there's this kind of reciprocal relationship around a lot of the muscles in the body that when one is contracting, the other one's probably relaxing. And then there's other muscles where, they don't expect any kind of symmetry at all. When we look more internally, however, we actually see that there's a lot of muscles, especially in this kind of central core region, where the only way they can work is if both sides contract equally. And this is a problem because for the brain, most of your muscle activation is coming from different sides. So the left side of the brain is controlling the muscles on the right side. The right side of the brain is controlling the muscles on the left side. And so what ends up happening is each one sort of develops its own systems of when to contract, when to relax. And while they, hopefully they're really good at communicating side to side, they don't necessarily need to be. They can sort of go off in their own directions. If I'm going to learn to throw a ball, the other side doesn't need to pay attention and learn what I'm doing. It just needs to learn what it needs to do in order to make that motion happen. When we get to these kind of central muscles, so if you imagine swallowing is not going to work if only one side of the muscle, the muscles on the kind of walls of the esophagus are contracting and the other side is just totally relaxed. It needs both of them to kind of contract and help to push the food down. And that's going to be the same around the intestines. And it is also the same for pretty much all of the sphincter muscles that we have. The sphincters only close if both sides are working equally well. So the part of the brain that controls this is, I believe, the supplemental motor area. Hope I'm not wrong on that, because I don't want to refilm this a third time. But the supplemental motor area sits right at the very front of the brain, kind of a little bit closer to the center, so that these two sides can communicate a little bit more easily with each other. And the supplemental motor area is going to be really focused on symmetry in movement. So if we find that, we're trying these Kegel exercises, especially if you find, you're trying it specifically trying to shut off the flow of urine, and even when you feel like you're squeezing, it doesn't feel like it's working. One of the things that we actually might want to look to is not the Kegel exercises themselves, but actually, can we stimulate this supplemental motor area in the frontal lobe of the brain? And how do we do that? Basically, we're going to perform any kinds of movements that are exactly the same bilateral between one side and the other. Okay, so think about things like squats, like push-ups. In these exercises, both sides of the body are moving in exactly the same way. And basically, that is what we are going to try and stimulate. And if you want to get the sort of biggest bang for your buck in terms of getting a lot of blood flow into this brain region, the area that you're really going to want to focus on is going to be your hands. So actually, rather than, the squats obviously can have a big benefit to the pelvic floor. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I brought it up, is, doing a lot of squats, trying to focus on both sides moving as equally as possible can be helpful. But even better, can you focus on moving your hands at the same time in completely equal motion? So it could be, a little tapping exercise like this, could be like a complex coordination exercise, anything where both hands are supposed to be doing exactly the same thing at exactly the same time. It's going to be a really great way to get blood flow into this brain region. And again, if you then combine it with everything else that we've talked about, so whether that's your glute bridges or some neck or jaw exercises or squats, as well as Kegel exercises, as well as contracting when you're on the long exhale. Again, you might find that this like little stack, everything stacked on top of each other, might actually be your winning ticket. A lot of the time when it comes to the pelvic floor, we need to really kind of amp up the intensity for the brain, not intensity for the muscles. The brain should be controlling the muscles by itself without our conscious control. So if we can intensify the stimulus to the regions of the brain that are actually controlling these areas, we can get a stronger response that lasts for longer. All right, so that's kind of all the physical exercises that I wanted to cover. The last exercise, so when I filmed this before, this was the first bullet point, because I believe it's the most important. In fact, it just is the most important, and that is going to be stress. So you probably can see a bunch of reasons why stress might affect the pelvic floor based on everything that we've sort of talked about. We've mentioned that, the digestive processes are somewhat involved in pelvic floor control. Digestion is strongly influenced by stress. When you're in sort of fight or flight, your brain sends signals to your digestive system to say, look, as we get more and more stressed, I don't want you to focus on doing a thorough job here. I just want you to focus on getting the bare basics. Extract as much of the key nutrients as you can, but get this stuff out of here as quickly as you possibly can. When you're in a situation like that, the brain doesn't have any vested interest in like holding on to the pelvic floor muscles, because the goal is to evacuate the bowels. So why would it want to retain control over the sphincters at all? When the sphincters relax, all the other surrounding muscles can relax. We just want to get everything through and out as quickly as we possibly can. Similarly, stress also affects pretty strongly the frontal lobes of the brain. So when we talk about this supplemental motor area that's controlling all of the kind of symmetrically firing muscles down the midline, this is going to be influenced by stress as well. When we are more highly stressed, again, in an ideal world, we don't really have reason to be eating. I guess our bodies and brains were designed in a time where it's like, if you're in danger, you shouldn't be snacking. You should be getting away from the danger. In modern times, we've kind of managed to figure out how to get ourselves in stress so often and for so long that it becomes a habit. And so for a lot of us, we're actually chronically in a stressed out state. It might not be like a highly stressed out state. It might be chronic low levels of stress, but that still is going to have the knock-on effect to our frontal lobe, which then means that we're not going to be in a position where our brain is expecting to be swallowing food, digesting food, excreting food. It's all of these things are going to be affected down the chain. So when it comes to good pelvic floor control, the top thing that you can actually be doing is looking at stress management and stress regulation. And I guarantee you, even if you go, oh, look, my life isn't that stressful, this can't be the thing. Like, I'm kind of feeling fine. I'm feeling good about everything. Stress is not necessarily just the psychological things that you're dealing with. Stress is also the physical state of your body. So consciously, you're aware of all of the social things that cause you stress. So that's going to be your relationships with other people. That's going to be like finances, like your ability to provide for yourself or for others. Anything else? I think those are kind of the two things. Like finances, I guess you can include like career and goals and education and all that. Like, can you be friends with other people so that they don't turn on you? And can you get enough stuff that you can keep going another day, or use it to make friends with other people? That's the things that your conscious brain cares about when it comes to stress. And maybe a few other things of like, are we in any physical danger right now? Anything where you can actually think of the thing that's bothering you, that is the conscious stress. Annoyingly, your conscious brain only really accounts for maybe about 5% of all of the activity going on in your brain. And the unconscious systems have their own priority list of what is stressful and what is not. Some of it is influenced by what you're consciously stressed by. So if you work out, that difficult conversation with your boss or your partner, by relieving your conscious stress, that also stops sending stress signals to the unconscious brain as well. So you get like a double win. So that's one of the reasons why, when you sort out all of the things that you're consciously bothered by, it feels so good, because your conscious system is calming down, but then because the conscious system calms down, the unconscious system also calms down as well. But the unconscious systems are paying attention to many, many more things. So a lot of it's going to be down to sensation, or do all of your senses agree with each other? So you've got, sight, sound, touch, smell, taste to give you a picture of what's going on outside the world. You've got stretch and balance and pressure and things like that tell you how your body is moving. So if there's too much stretch on one side of your body and too much stretch also on the other side of your body, your brain goes, hey, That doesn't make any sense. That means that my arm is straight and bent at the same time. How do I resolve this? Something's damaged, something's not giving me the right information. That is going to cause stress. That is going to affect the unconscious systems. Then we've got things like blood pressure, blood acidity levels, heart rate, how much oxygen do you have, how much waste products have you got that haven't been cleared out yet. All of these things are also impacting your autonomic system, the unconscious systems in your brain, telling it, hey, like, you think you're good, but we're not having a great time here. We actually feel pretty stressed out and we wish you would do something about it. And the problem with this kind of stress is when your brain is unconsciously creating stress, it's kind of taking this information and then producing stress hormones. The unconscious parts of your brain don't really have amazing systems for telling the conscious part what is going on. So what tends to happen is the conscious part of your brain just is kind of aware that things aren't really going well. Sometimes you get like emotional issues, so you're feeling like anxious or sad or something like that. Sometimes you just notice that physically, like I said, the chronic stress that you're experiencing might actually be at a lower level where it's not quite affecting your emotions in an intense state. So what you're actually going to see is physical changes that just don't make a whole lot of sense. And the kind of classic physical changes are going to be, number one, you're going to lack coordination. So you're going to start bumping into things, stubbing your toes on things, whacking your fingers off stuff. Your coordination just isn't going to feel as good as it used to. That's going to make movement feel all clunky and irritable. And then a classic second one is that, pelvic floor function is going to degrade because, as I said, your brain is getting ready to go into this kind of fight or flight state where the goal is not to digest food and think about the future. The goal is to evacuate the bowels and get moving with whatever action needs to be done. And if you've been pushing yourself into this state where something low-lying is causing you physical stress for a long period of time, then you're going to find that pelvic floor seems out of control. And even though you're doing all the strengthening exercises, even though you're doing like the Pilates and the core stability and all of the other stuff that I've kind of already said is worth looking into, you're still going to find that the state of the brain in general is we're not supposed to be holding on to this bit. We're supposed to be in a completely different state. And so stress management is absolutely the top thing that we need to look at when it comes to pelvic floor. So if you've watched the video this way around, if you didn't see it before, sorry that it took till the end to get to this bit. Maybe it is better, if you've already tried pelvic floor exercises, then, you can go up the ladder and just see, okay, well, maybe the glute stuff helps, maybe the jaw stuff helps. If you kind of get through all of those things and nothing's working, the logical assumption that you can make is that stress levels are too high. And if you can't find some conscious stressors to be dealing with, then the next thing is just to look anywhere in your body. If you want a good starting point, balance is probably the biggest one to address. In all humans, balance from the inner ear is going to decline as we age, and as those balance systems decline, the brain just naturally gets a little bit more stressed, because the worst thing that can happen to your brain is that you fall over. So your vestibular system is pretty much the top thing that I give to almost everybody. If you want to train something to kind of thrive in your everyday life, it is improve the function of your vestibular system, get your brain unconsciously balancing better, and then it won't be so stressed about the biggest thing that kind of worries it on a daily basis. All right, cool. So that was an uncomfortable episode. As I said, sorry for such graphic detail, but I don't know how to address this topic otherwise. if you find this stuff interesting, if you want to look into, just general health for the pelvic floor, definitely recommend, get yourself a Pilates class. Some other things could be helpful, like Feldenkrais might do some kinds of pelvic floor awareness and training drills and things like that, and just the general kind of methodology of Feldenkrais can be useful for a lot of the things that we've talked about, including reducing physical stress. If you'd like to go into it even deeper, I would recommend book yourself in for a session. So there's loads of links in the description here in terms of online courses that I have available, but you can also book for a coaching session with me if your budget is tight and you would rather take things at your own pace. The two courses that I would recommend looking into, number one, lowest on the list in terms of breaking the bank, is the Neuroband. So this is a wearable vision and balance training tool that I've developed. It's specifically going to target the vestibular system. And as I said, the reason that I've made a course for this, and the reason that it's at the very lowest price point, is this is what I believe is going to have the most benefit to the most people overall. And I'd rather people get introduced to the kind of work that I do with the thing that's most useful, rather than saving that for like behind a big paywall or whatever. So the Euroband, absolutely look into. The other course that could be really helpful when it comes to reducing all of that physical stress, but also improving function to the frontal lobe, which will, again, as I said, give you that kind of good connection with the pelvic floor, is my meditation course. It's not a meditation course like you would traditionally expect. I'm kind of looking at meditation as a strengthening tool for consciousness, and doing that by improving the quality of like sensory input to the brain, improving the quality of how we think, how we process thoughts. Those are kind of the two that you're going to want to look into. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, thoughts, if I got anything else wrong in this video, let me know. I will re-record it as many times as I have to, but I believe this time around, all the information is now correct. So thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.